Click, call, or visit a Spectrum store today.
Even the mighty might not see it coming. It's prediabetes, and it captures 1 in 3 adults. But you can escape. Take the 1-minute prediabetes risk test to know where you stand and prevent or delay type 2 diabetes. Be your own hero on smartphones everywhere at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Spectrum News Plus. Local stories, connecting communities. Streaming now on the Spectrum News app and free with your Spectrum subscription.
I'm Sharon Tazwell. Here's your Spectrum News at 90. Wall Street sell-off continued Tuesday following another back and forth on tariffs between the U.S. and Canada. President Trump is pausing a plan to double tariffs on some Canadian imports after the Premier of Ontario backed down on imposing a surcharge on electricity, while the White House blaming the Biden administration for the state of the economy.
We are in a period of economic transition. We are in a period of transition from the mess that was created under Joe Biden in the previous administration.
The House narrowly approves a short-term funding bill that would prevent a government shutdown Friday. The bill now heads to the Senate. The legislation keeps the government funded through September 30th. The U.S. Department of Education is cutting roughly 50% of its workforce, according to reports. It is the latest move by the Trump administration to shrink the size of the federal government. The department currently has around 4,400 employees. In a high-stakes meeting taking place in Saudi Arabia Tuesday as U.S. officials meet with leaders from Ukraine, the U.S. has agreed to immediately lift a pause on intelligence sharing as well as military aid to Kyiv. Ukraine expressed readiness to accept a proposal to enact a 30-day ceasefire. And that is a look at your Spectrum News in 90. I never...
I'm meteorologist Ian Cassette with your weather on the ones. Our forecast focus here on this Tuesday night. We are looking at unsettled weather across the west with multiple systems passing through, bringing heavy rain and snow and potential for flooding. In the east, temperatures well above average. And this is going to set the stage for potential severe weather later in the week. We'll talk all about this and more coming up with your weather on the ones.
Mounting worries on Wall Street Tuesday amid uncertainty over President Donald Trump's tariffs. Thanks for joining us. I'm Sharon Tazwell. All 3 major indexes once again ended the day in red, with the Dow Jones dropping more than 450 points. The S&P climbed back after it was 10% below its record close earlier in the day. The Nasdaq fell just over 1.1%. The uncertainty on Wall Street comes amid another day of back and forth when it comes to tariffs. The Trump administration dropped its plan to double tariffs on imports on Canadian aluminum and steel after Ontario agreed to suspend a surcharge on electricity imports. Spectrum's Daniel Grimes is in Washington with the latest.
The Premier of Ontario called a truce late Tuesday, dropping his plan to impose a 25% surcharge on the electricity the province sells to 3 U.S. states.
He's not going to do that. Okay, he's not going to do that. And it would have been a very bad thing if he did, and he's not going to do that, so I respect that.
The Ontario Premier, Doug Ford, also said he would meet with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick on Thursday to explore ending the budding trade war between the 2 countries. The Premier backed down after President Donald Trump said he would double to 50% tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum imports on Wednesday in retaliation for the electricity surcharge. After Ford raised the white flag, the White House said the president would back off as well, withdrawing his plan to double tariffs on selected metals. But the president still reiterated his calls for Canada to become the 51st state, a push that Canadian officials consider a provocation. The tariff whiplash fueled new fears on Wall Street about the economy because tariffs typically lead to price hikes, reducing consumer purchases. On Wall Street, stocks sold off for another day, extending a month-long slump.
This trade chaos, in my view, is like a big anchor around the American economy.
Now, still on the table, President Trump's threat to impose tariffs on cars coming into the country if Canada does not abandon charges it imposes on agricultural and dairy products. That is likely to be a topic when American and Canadian officials meet on Thursday. In Washington, Daniel Grimes, Spectrum News.
On Capitol Hill, the House narrowly passed a stopgap spending bill, moving Congress a step closer to avoiding a government shutdown. The bill boosts defense spending by $6 billion while cutting non-defense spending by $13 billion. Nearly all Democrats voted against the bill, along with Republican Thomas Massie of Kentucky. President Trump criticized Massie online and won over a handful of other Republican holdouts at the last minute.
President Trump is a hands-on president, not just at the White House, but when his legislative agenda is moving through Congress. He's been a great help to us.
The bill now goes to the Senate, where it will need support from at least 8 Democratic senators to pass. The Senate has until Friday at midnight to avoid a government shutdown. Ukraine is expressing readiness to accept a U.S. proposal to enact a 30-day ceasefire with Russia. The move comes as U.S. and Ukrainian officials meet in Saudi Arabia Tuesday. And as Spectrum's Taylor Popolaris reports from the White House, the Trump administration is lifting a pause on military aid to Kyiv, effective immediately.
Less than 2 weeks after a disastrous White House meeting between President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, top officials from both countries regrouped Tuesday in Saudi Arabia.
We've gone from if the war is going to end to now how the war is going to end, and this was an important first step.
National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and Secretary of State Marco Rubio emerged from Tuesday's sit-down saying progress was made. They said Ukraine is willing to accept a U.S. proposal for a 30-day ceasefire if Russia agrees. And as a result of the progress, they said the U.S. will immediately resume the military aid and intelligence sharing that Ukraine desperately needs to defend itself. The U.S. paused the aid after that White House meeting between President Zelensky and Trump went off the rails.
And what we leave here with today is a commitment that the Ukrainians are ready to stop fighting. They're ready to stop the shooting so that they can get to the table and bring about peace for their country and for the world.
Back at the White House, President Trump said he thinks he'll talk with Russian President Vladimir Putin this week about the potential deal.
Hopefully President Putin will agree to that also, and we can get this show on the road.
The head of Ukraine's presidential office wrote on X, "A just peace is key for us. We want a lasting peace. Thank you for the constructive meeting." Rubio and Waltz said the ball is now in Russia's court to decide if next steps can be taken.
I will talk to my Russian counterpart in the coming days. Secretary Rubio will be with G7 foreign ministers in the next couple of days. We have the NATO Secretary General in the White House on Thursday.
And Taylor Popolaris joins us from the White House. Taylor, what can you tell us about the latest efforts from the U.S. to secure a minerals deal with Ukraine? And also, what can we expect between Russia and Kyiv?
Well, with that minerals agreement, Sharon, we heard from Secretary of State Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz essentially saying that deal is back on the table and they think they're headed to a point where the U.S. and Ukraine will sign it potentially in the coming days, but that the focus of this meeting was reaching that ceasefire. And Rubio said regarding those negotiations, he said there isn't a military solution to get out of this war. He feels the only way that Russia and Ukraine can reach an end to this war is if there's a negotiation that both countries are involved in. So that was part of the theme behind these talks.
All right, Taylor Popolaris from the White House. Thanks. Federal investigators offering up new safety measures following a deadly mid-air collision that killed 67 people in Washington, D.C. We're breaking down a potential ban on some helicopter flights. Just ahead.
We said we'd never break the 3-second rule. Never do that. And never become a minivan mom.
Hey, Chris.
As parents, we say never a lot, but never happens. So when you say you'd never leave your child in a hot car, know it can happen. Before you leave the car, always stop, look, lock.
I really am in the middle of nowhere. Every day is different. Chores, come on, homeschooling. And then I fit in the rug business. I just got a new batch of rugs that I'd love to show you. I have a website, and a lot of what I do is sharing my home life. Mommy's leaving. Reliable, high-speed internet is the foundation of our business. Spectrum was great. They went out of their way to make sure that I was okay and I was taken care of. Shoo! And that's the awesomeness of having Spectrum.
I'm an ex-drug dealer, and I'll be your sub today. 2 milligrams of fentanyl can be lethal. A lethal dose is in here. Who gets it, I won't know.
It's cheap, it's potent, and it's profitable.
The sad reality is fentanyl is being mixed into everything now.
More kids should know.
You're not gonna get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff.
Mama!
Like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat.
I'm meteorologist Ian Cassette with your weather on the ones. The video behind me shows you the powerful storm that rolled through central Florida Monday morning, and this was a reminder how quickly things can change. An EF2 tornado touched down there, rare for this area, and the strongest tornado they've had since 1998. And this was taken by Amy Sweezy there of our Spectrum news station in Orlando. So hopefully she's able to recover from that. Thankfully, no injuries from that storm. But our low pressure system that caused that tornado is now out at sea. High pressure in place in the eastern half of the U.S., keeping it quiet and mild. Our first system on the west coast, this is where all the action is going to be, bringing some rain Southern California into tonight. You can see it here with the water vapor imagery. There it is, spinning right south of LA, but we have another system on the way, an atmospheric river that's going to bring some heavy rainfall along the west coast, and we do have a concern for some flooding for LA down to San Diego, where a few inches of rainfall will be possible Wednesday into Thursday, and these will go into effect Wednesday night, with the concern that we get too much rain in a short period of time. So here's that first system. It moves out, bringing the rain and snow into the desert southwest. By Wednesday morning, our next system moves on shore in Northern California through the Bay Area Wednesday afternoon, heavy rain up there. But down into LA, we have the profiles where it doesn't take as much rainfall to get flooding. And that is what we're going to be watching for Wednesday night to Thursday morning before it exits eastward. And this potent system is going to lead to a multi-day severe threat for the plains and the southeast and east coast later into the week. Rainfall forecast, 1 to 2 inches possible down in the valley, a few inches higher deeper into the mountains where also snow will be expected, especially Sierra Nevada, which will see some decent snow out of this. But with all that going on the west coast, look how warm it is elsewhere. We have 79 degrees tomorrow in Houston, 75 degrees in Kansas City. This warmth extends all week, and this is going to help set the stage for that severe weather threat later on. And we'll talk more about that coming up with your weather on the ones.
If you're just joining us, here's what you need to know. U.S. officials will negotiate the USMCA trade agreements with Canada. This after Ontario paused a 25% tax on electricity exports to the U.S. And the National Transportation Safety Board is pushing for air traffic control changes in Washington, D.C. That's in hopes to prevent another mid-air collision like this January crash that killed 67 people. And the measles outbreak in Texas is growing, reaching 223 total cases on Tuesday. Health officials say almost all are unvaccinated individuals, and that's what you need to know. The National Transportation Safety Board is issuing what is calling an urgent recommendation. Officials are calling on the FAA to permanently close a Washington, D.C. helicopter route due to the collision risk it poses. Now, this, of course, comes after the mid-air collision of a Black Hawk and a passenger jet that killed 67 people. Now, Spectrum's Chris Welch joins us now with more details. Chris.
Yeah, Sharon, NTSB Chair Jennifer Homendy did not mince words today, saying the distance between helicopters and planes on their routes near Reagan National Airport is simply too close, and she says it's led to too many close calls over the last several years, and of course, it resulted in that tragedy January 29th. She says the route should be closed permanently.
We've determined that the existing separation distances between helicopter traffic operating on Route 4 and aircraft landing on runway 33 are insufficient and pose an intolerable risk to aviation safety by increasing the chances of a mid-air collision at DCA. Let me repeat that. They pose an intolerable risk to aviation safety.
Hamady went on to say that she was, quote, angry and that it should not take a tragedy to require action. Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy says that, yes, the helicopter route will remain closed, at least for right now. Under the current rules, helicopters and planes can be as close as 75 feet apart. Investigators say that between 2021 and 2024, there were more than 15,000 instances of planes getting alerts about helicopters being just too close in proximity, Sharon.
Really fascinating. It also seems she had a message to Americans who may be nervous to fly, especially into Reagan.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of news reports in the last couple of months since this happened. There was that medevac plane in Philadelphia. There's a couple more. There was a near collision in Chicago. And so she had a message that air travel is safe. Take a listen.
I just flew with my daughter out of DCA on a CRJ with PSA Airlines. Aviation is incredibly safe. DCA is where I always fly out of. I say often that your biggest risk is in your personal vehicle when you're going to and from the airport.
And just for context, we should point out that 40,000 people each year die in vehicle crashes.
Yeah, always an interesting comparison there. Chris Welch, thank you.
Thanks.
President Trump is blaming Mexico and Canada for our country's fentanyl crisis. It's one of the reasons Trump says he's imposing tariffs on our neighbors to the north and to the south. Spectrum's Alex Cohen takes a look at how this lethal drug is entering the U.S.
They've allowed fentanyl to come into our country at levels never seen before, killing hundreds of thousands of our citizens and many very young, beautiful people, destroying families. Nobody's ever seen anything like it.
President Donald Trump claims that Canada and Mexico are flooding the United States with fentanyl. But Mexico wasn't always the dominant supplier, says retired DEA agent William Bodner, who began tracking the narcotic a decade ago.
But at that time, it was generally a drug that was sent by express parcel from China. Fentanyl sent directly to the United States to people here ordering it on the dark net.
Then in 2016, cartels from Jalisco and Sinaloa began to see how lucrative the possibilities were and started getting involved in the synthesis of the drug. Shortly after his inauguration, the president announced a 25% tariff on Mexico and Canada. Mexico's president responded by sending 10,000 additional troops to the border to help stop the flow of fentanyl. Journalist Sam Quinones says this is the best approach to stop the cartels.
I think what needs to happen is a sustained, relentless assault on the drug trafficking world, very much like what happened in the United States when we finally, in the mid-'80s, finally began to take on the Italian mob.
But Mexico may have its limits, as seen after the most recent round of Trump tariff threats.
We have said it in various ways. Cooperation and coordination, yes. Subordination and intervention, no. No.
Similar outrage erupted recently from Scheinbaum's Canadian counterpart.
There is absolutely no justification or need whatsoever for these tariffs today.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau reminded the U.S. that his country recently implemented a $1.3 billion border plan and disputed Trump's claims.
Far less than 1% of fentanyl flows and less than 1% of illegal crossings into the United States comes from Canada.
In fact, during the 2024 fiscal year, while 21,000 pounds of fentanyl were seized along the U.S.-Mexico border, a mere 43 pounds were seized from the northern border. And one statistic that hasn't come up during these tariff talks? In fiscal year 2023, more than 86% of those sentenced for fentanyl trafficking were U.S. citizens. Alex Cohen, Spectrum News.
SpaceX set to launch a new mission to the International Space Station. How it paves the way for 2 NASA astronauts to come back home. Just ahead.
For the millions of school-aged children across the country, the state of their schools can have a lasting impact on their health and well-being.
The majority of school districts aren't doing comprehensive regular water quality testing.
As CO2 levels rise in a space, cognitive function takes a direct decline.
We visit 2 school districts working to create safe and healthy environments for their students.
Watch Exploring Your Health, Curing Our Classrooms, available on the Spectrum News app.
Starting a business is hard. You have to stay connected at all times.
As we've been growing the studio, Spectrum's been there every step of the way. I'm always able to make the phone call that I need. I'm able to shoot that text message or that email. Every vital piece of equipment that we have here uses Spectrum.
Fast, reliable internet, starting at $40 a month, backed by the Spectrum commitment to keep your business connected.
I tell my son, I love you every single day. I love you. Now, my dad has never said that to me. Not because he doesn't love me, but because culturally it wasn't comfortable for him. Now that he's a grandfather, he says, I love you to my son every time he sees him. My advice to all the fathers out there, forget the cultural restrictions. They grow up way too fast for you to waste even a single precious moment.
Food isn't just fuel to live, it's fuel to grow. My family relied on public assistance to help provide meals for us. These meals fueled my involvement in theater and the arts as a child, which fostered my love for acting. The Feeding America network of food banks helps millions of people put food on the table. When people are fed, futures are nourished. Join the movement to end hunger, and together we can open endless possibilities for people to thrive. Visit feedingamerica.org/actnow.
I'm meteorologist Ian Cassette with your weather on the ones. I want to highlight just how abnormally warm it's going to be across much of the country this week. We pick things up Wednesday, 20+ degrees above average in the plains, St. Louis, Kansas City, Minneapolis. As we get into Thursday, even warmer, 30+ degrees above average in Minneapolis. But note, all the cool air is in the west. A system's going to be moving to the east, bringing with it those storms and a cold front. And that will change things up, but with that warmth and some Gulf moisture, as I'll show, we are going to have a multi-day threat of severe weather. Looking at a few places across the country, LA, 50s, cool, rainy weather here this week. Columbus, 60s and 70s, mild. Houston, very warm temperatures in the 80s, and New York sitting in the 50s, but quiet. The next few days, we will have dry weather from Texas north to Kansas and up into the northern plains, while all the wet weather will be in the west and some parts of the southeast coming from that system drifting across, which you see here. A low pressure system will move across the desert southwest with rain and snow, jumping into Texas, and then there will be a possibility for some scattered severe thunderstorms over southeastern Oklahoma, the Arklatex region Wednesday evening. Damaging winds and hail will be the main risk with this, and that will continue to the east. See it spinning about, leading to more potential severe weather for Mississippi and Alabama. But at least for Wednesday evening, the severe threat will be from Shreveport to Broken Bow, Little Rock, Greenville, and that may carry into early Thursday morning with hail and winds the main risk. Then, as we get to later in the week, this is Friday late, we have our next system that's going to be strengthening off of the Rockies, pulling in some Gulf moisture and working with that abnormal warmth that I had mentioned earlier. This is going to lead to a severe threat for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday all across the East Coast from the Ohio Valley to the south. This is March, where we have warm enough temperatures in the Gulf, that Gulf moisture fueling this front and the potential for a severe outbreak. Already we have highlighted highlighted Friday, St. Louis to Little Rock, likely risk of severe weather, a little less likely but still possible from Chicago down to Shreveport. And by Saturday, that severe threat pushes to the southeast for Atlanta, Pensacola, Birmingham, and some strong signals. So my encouragement to you is to download our Spectrum News app and remain weather aware throughout this week.
NASA's 2 astronauts are expected to finally return to Earth as soon as Sunday, after 9 months on the International Space Station. The 2 flew to the ISS last June on Boeing's new Starliner capsule, which had problems and flew back empty. Spectrum's Ariel Wessler has more from the pilots who are looking forward to coming home.
The hardest part is, having the folks on the ground have to not know exactly when we're coming back.
Speaking at a recent news conference, astronaut Suni Williams talked about her much-anticipated homecoming.
So I have 2 Labrador retrievers right now, Gunner and Rotor, who have been having boy time with my husband, and I think they'll be very happy for Mom to come home.
This is the 3rd trip to the International Space Station for her and Butch Wilmore.
Crew 9.
The 2 test pilots were only supposed to be gone a week, but their Boeing Starliner space capsule had so many problems, NASA ruled it too dangerous to carry anyone, and it flew back empty.
We came up prepared to stay long, even though we planned to stay short. That's what we do in human spaceflight. That's what your nation's human spaceflight program is all about, planning for unknown, unexpected contingencies.
Officials said there wasn't a way to bring the pair back earlier on SpaceX without interrupting other scheduled missions. Both Wilmore and Williams are retired Navy captains and took a spacewalk together in January.
Suni's a great crewmate. She's just an awesome person.
Retired astronaut Danny Olivas and Williams were part of the same class at NASA.
We're affectionately referred to as the Penguins because we said we were never going to fly. And then you look at Suni now, and she's got the record for the Penguins in space.
Williams was on board the space station in 2007 when Olivas flew his first shuttle mission and brought her back home. He says NASA made the right call to leave the astronauts in orbit.
We need to make sure that before we put human beings on spacecraft, we want to know that it's going to function the way it's supposed to.
Crew 10 is expected to launch Wednesday on the Dragon capsule. The 2 crews will spend a few days together on the ISS before Wilmore and Williams head home with astronaut Nick Hague and cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov. Wilmore says he thinks the issues they encountered with Starliner will help improve space travel for future astronauts.
I think Suni and I, even though we only rode uphill, we only did our tests uphill, I think we've done that for Starliner.
Because Wilmore and Williams will be wearing generic SpaceX flight suits when they ride home on Dragon, the outfits won't have their names. Williams said, quote, "That's okay, we're just Butch and Suni. Everyone knows who we are by now." Ariel Wessler, Spectrum News.
The Philadelphia Eagles officially accepted an invitation to visit the White House on April 28th to celebrate their Super Bowl 59 victory. The announcement comes weeks after the team said they would be honored to visit Washington, D.C. The Eagles beat the Kansas City Chiefs, giving the team its 2nd Lombardi trophy. When the team won its first Super Bowl back in 2018, the Eagles decided not to celebrate the win with President Trump, who was in his first term in office at the time. I'm Sharon Tazwell. Thanks for watching. Your Spectrum News in 90 is coming up right after this short break. Stay with us.
Friday nights, The Big Deal with Errol Lewis, where Spectrum News' local political journalists break down the most important issues shaping our nation.
Our journey towards improving mental health doesn't always present a clear path. Every Thursday on Your Mental Health, we listen to voices across our communities, discussing the challenges of everyday life and presenting accessible resources to guide us along the path to our well-being, providing hope and empowering choices that light the way to a healthier you.
Your Mental Health with Dr. Nicole Clark, Thursdays on Spectrum News Plus, available on all your favorite devices.
It's game time at the arena, and 20,000 fans are looking for a win.
With an ultra-high-speed network and seamless Wi-Fi, fans can get in the door fast and share the game's best moments in real time. And with Spectrum Business committed to keeping them connected 100% of the time, they won't miss a second of the action. A secure, reliable connection from Spectrum Business means the fan experience is a guaranteed win.
Whether it's our stories, the warmth of our laugh, or our family's secret sauce, we all bring something different to the table. So make some space. The power of connection is waiting right outside your comfort zone. Learn how you can help strengthen your community at belongingbeginswithus.org/teamup.
Weather can be beautiful, inconvenient, and at times powerful. And it affects everything we do. At Spectrum News Plus, our weather experts update you with the information and the context you need so you can better plan your day. And we do it every 10 minutes. We're the calm in the storm. Weather on the Ones on Spectrum News Plus, exclusively on Spectrum. And get your weather anytime on the Spectrum News app. Spectrum News Plus. Local stories, connecting communities. Streaming now on